Okay, thank you, dear colleagues. Yeah, let me introduce first. My name is Haryanto, Joko Tri Haryanto. I'm the senior researcher from the Fiscal Policy Agency, a Center for Climate Change, Ministry of Finance. Today we have a special session, very impressive and also a very interesting topic with the title Enabling Energy Transition for ASEAN. And this event will be the first preliminary event under the ASEAN chairmanships. And today, yeah, we have two respective person, a speaker. The first, Pak David Elzinger. Pak David is a uh, principal and principal energy specialist, particularly from the climate change issue and also ETM leadership from ADB. And the second person, we have Ibu Masita Kristalin, special advisor to the Minister of Finance. And opening will deliver by Ibu Dian Lestari, Director for the Center Climate Change Financing and Multilateral Policy, Fiscal Policy Agency. And this event will be closed by Pak Adi Budiarso, the Director from the Center Financial Sector Policy, Fiscal Policy Agency, Indonesian Ministry of Finance. And before we start, perhaps let me give some briefly. Following the achievement of G20 presidency last year, actually, particularly under the Sustainable Finance Working Group, has adopted the transition activity as important part of achieving global commitment on the Paris Agreement, and especially addressing needs of the developing country. So the follow-up progress should be directed to the global move in defining and also acknowledging the transition activity for that purpose. At, at the same time, as you are aware that Indonesia also got the deal, the best deal with ZP and also ADB energy transition mechanism activity. And ASEAN actually also try to continue and develop new standards for the foundation framework FF and also plus standard with the metric and threshold to the further qualify and benchmark for the eligible green activity. So Indonesia Ministry of Finance, Center for Finance, Fiscal Policy Agency try to conduct this seminar just to outline the energy transition challenge as a common agenda across the ASEAN country, with focusing on the power generation and also early retirement of coal power plant. So without further ado, yeah, we ask Ibu Dian to open this session. So Ibu Dian, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Pak Joko, distinguished speakers, participants, ladies and gentlemen. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon and a very warm greeting to all of you. I would like to convey our appreciation to our distinguished speakers, Ibu Masita Kristalin and Pak David Zinga, and all participants who's joined this seminar. Today, we will discuss about enabling energy transition for ASEAN and why it is important. As we know that coal-fired power plants are a major contributor to carbon emission globally. According to the International Energy Agency, coal power generation accounted for approximately 38% of global carbon dioxide emission from the energy sector in 2019. The use of coal as a resource of energy has been criticized due to its high carbon emission and its significant impact on air quality and public health. The emissions from coal power plants are considered as major contributor to climate change and global warming. In order to achieve Paris Agreement targets and net zero emission by 2050, many countries have set targets to reduce or phase out their coal power generation and develop more renewable energy power generation. We believe that phasing out coal toward energy transition is also a core interest of ASEAN. The seventh ASEAN Energy Outlook estimated that ASEAN would become the net importer of natural gas and coal in 2025 and 2039, respectively, hence contributing more to global greenhouse emission if no changes need in supply and demand. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, Indonesia is committed to the climate agenda. As a concrete step in materializing energy transition activity, Indonesia's Energy Transition Mechanism, or ETM, was officially announced during the COP26 in Glasgow as a collaboration program between Indonesia and the ASEAN Development Bank, or ADB. The ETM is designed to speed up the retirement of coal-fired power plants earlier than the original schedule and promote renewable energy development. It seeks an appropriate financing scheme and transaction approach that benefit communities, regional economies, as well as environment. By implementing the ETM program, we wish to accelerate our pathway toward net zero. Indonesia established the ETM country platform and launched it during the G20 summit in November last year. It is aimed to mobilize private and international participation in financing the ETM projects in a blended finance scheme. Following the establishment of the country platform, the government has received indication of interest from a number of development partners to participate in the ETM projects, including from the MDBs, bilateral partners, global private sectors, financial institutions, as well as philanthropists. This also includes the Just Energy Transition Partnership led by the US and Japan, indicating potential financing up to $20 billion from both public and private funding, as announced in the joint statement during the G20 summit. In October 2022, the government has also received funding commitment from the Climate Investment Fund, amounting to $500 million to be leveraged up to $4 billion for a number of ETM projects. We wish our ETM program would be a concrete showcase of transition activity and investment that successfully mobilizing participation of our developed partners and private sector, even under the current global situation that posing challenges to climate commitments and its resource mobilization. We hope that this can be replicated in other developing countries who aim to achieve their climate goals in a just and affordable manner. Ladies and gentlemen, most Asian countries currently still heavily rely on fossil fuels for its economic and industrial development. Fossil fuels contributed just over 75% of the energy mix by 2019 in the region, while renewable energy was only 14%. In 2020, the contribution of coal was nearly 32% of total ASEAN member countries' power generation capacity. Meanwhile, ASEAN agreed to increase the renewable energy contribution to 23% by 2025. As we move toward a low-carbon future, the ASEAN will face significant investment needs to a transition from fossil fuel-based energy to the renewable one. To achieve ASEAN's target of 23% renewables in the primary energy supply by 2025, the region would need to invest $27 billion in renewable energy every year. However, most ASEAN countries attracted no more than $8 billion annually from 2016 to 2021. An ASEAN report says that there are a number of challenges faced by ASEAN countries in delivering energy transition and achieving net zero. This includes the high cost of renewable energy, lack of sustainable business models and financial incentives to attract renewable energy and energy efficiency investment, market distortion, inefficiencies due to fossil fuel subsidies, and some more. ASEAN countries are also struggling to deal with the problem between achieving carbon reduction targets while aspiring for economic growth rates. A just and affordable transition could be our principle to balance between the economic growth and delivering our climate goals. A transition mechanism such as the ETM can be an approach that enables countries to shorten the life of coal-fired power plants and replace them with clean energy sources in a market-based and fair means to accelerate the transition to clean energy in a just and affordable manner. It allows countries to gradually reduce the share of coal in their generation mix while managing the economic and social impacts. Mobilizing financing is critical in the energy transition process, but a transition mechanism would allow a transformative financing that uses public-private funds in a blended finance scheme to accelerate a coal phase out and replace it with clean power capacity. In addition, ASEAN region offers a huge market opportunity for private investment in renewable energy. Thus, there's a need to create an enabling environment to attract investment that can be achieved through policies and incentives to stimulate private participation, and through the development of innovative financing mechanism dedicated for renewable energy financing platform. But of course, this effort will be more effective if undertaken through international cooperation and regional collaboration. International cooperation can help bridge the gaps and strengthen capacities, including in financial, knowledge, technology, or even human resources. Meanwhile, regional collaboration can help establish common standards and best practices that can help to provide certainty and accessibility of information, thus increase resource mobilization. This can refer to the ASEAN taxonomy for sustainable finance and the ASEAN transition finance standard that are currently being developed to serve as a common building block that enables an orderly transition and fosters sustainable finance adoption by ASEAN member states. Inclusion of transition activities in the taxonomy will help incentivize the financial market to utilize various instruments for transition transaction. In conjunction, deployment of various innovative financing instruments, including carbon credits, is envisaged to catalyze investment in energy transition projects. Ladies and gentlemen, to conclude, I would like to say that enabling energy transition for ASEAN is an important agenda for us. As we believe that ASEAN matters to the world as an epicentrum of growth, let us not be negligent in taking advantage of our economic interdependency while keep pursuing our climate agenda and contributing to global emission reduction target. Fulfilling the financing needs in energy transition for ASEAN would not be an easy task, especially during the current global financial situation. For this purpose, ASEAN must prepare and provide a well-designed enabling environment and means of implementation to attract international cooperation and private investment. With international cooperation and regional collaboration, we will be able to complement and strengthen national efforts to support energy transition agenda. And this is the objective of our today's seminar. Ibu Masita and Pak David will be the best resource person to share with you on this topic. I hope this seminar be a productive and attractive discussion forum, and I wish you all a fruitful discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ibu Dian. And now we turn to two distinguished speakers. We have Pak David and also Ibu Masita. Each person will deliver 25 minutes. For the first speaker will be delivered by Pak David. Pak David will try to deliver two main issues. The first issue related with the outline of the energy transition as an important agenda for the ASEAN member state, with focusing on the power generation and also early retirement of CIP. And the second issue regarding on the explain the initiative concept on the energy transition mechanism as the enable transition pathway and also interlinkages with the finance system. And the second speaker, Ibu Masita, will deliver two main issues also. The first regarding on the ASEAN decarbonization pathway, and the second issue related in the explain case for Indonesia. So we deliver Pak David. The floor is yours. You have 25 minutes. Thank you, Pak David.
Great. Thank you, Pak Joko. It's a pleasure to be here today and speaking alongside Ibu Dian and Ibu Masita. Thank you for this opportunity on behalf of ADB. I want to focus today on talking about energy transition from a regional perspective. And I will not touch much on Indonesia in particular, because I want to, of course, hear from Ibu Masita in her discussion and her views on Indonesia. Next slide, please. one of the things that, as we worked on in the energy sector over the last number of years, is we acknowledged that we must make the shift to renewable energy in order to meet global climate goals while providing the necessary energy for the economies in the region. But what was clear is that there were a significant share of legacy coal-fired power plants in the region and also globally. In this context, this was one of the gaps where we knew that if we don't address the emissions from these coal plants, that we will miss Paris Agreement targets. So, of course, one main part of the dialogue that in shifting to renewables was the decreasing costs that we've seen over the last 20 years. This is exciting to see that renewables are becoming more cost effective. And in that respect, the cost of operating existing coal plants is expected to be higher than the levelized cost of new renewable energy plants in the next 10 to 15 years. But the problem is many of the existing plants have long-term secured offtake agreements. And so even if there is a significant deployment of renewables, these plants won't be stranded, and therefore an intervention is needed. And that is where ADB has worked with a number of countries to launch the Regional Energy Transition Mechanism that was originally proposed under the World Economic Forum in 2018 as a replicable and scalable market-based model that can accelerate the transition from coal to clean power. So in understanding this model, we embarked on a technical and financial feasibility study and working initially in Indonesia, Philippines, and Vietnam. And actually, we've also started in Pakistan as well, and some other countries have expressed interest. And by doing this early work, which I'll cover in more detail in some of the following slides, we realized that retiring 50% of today's coal power plant capacity in just these three countries of Indonesia, Philippines, and Vietnam 10 to 15 years sooner could reduce CO2 emissions by approximately 200 million tons per year, or 2 to 3 gigatons cumulatively. And this could then be replicated into other economies with high coal shares and similar market barriers. So we believe that this is very much a worthwhile way to do. And looking at ADB's role, we feel that it's important for us to be able to crowd in both public and private sector partners, support a just transition for affected people and communities, ensure climate credentials, make sure that this is resulting in net emission reductions, and in the end, hoping to be able to harness carbon offsets that could then be used to accelerate the shift from coal to clean energy even faster. So the main point I want to hear about this is that the energy transition is really about moving from coal to clean energy. So it includes decommissioning of coal or accelerating the decommissioning of coal, but also the other side, which is replacing that with clean energy. Both of these sides need to be addressed, and the accelerating of coal, which is something we spend a lot of time discussing, has really been a gap in the broad energy transition agenda. Next slide, please. So I just want to highlight that the two countries that we launched the regional ETM with has been Philippines and Indonesia. And it's been very exciting to work in both of these countries and work alongside the leadership here. But again, this is a model that we believe can be used in many other countries. And while initially focused on coal to clean energy, it could also look at other fossil fuels and accelerate that shift to clean energy as well. Japan's Ministry of Finance gave us the first seed funding to this initiative, and that's been very appreciated. Often the first fundraising is the most difficult, but this is also, we've had a significant engagement from a range of other countries, and we highlight Denmark, the UK, and the US, but also many others who have been encouraged by this and hope to engage going forward. Next slide, please. So why are we looking at coal-fired electricity in Asia? And if we look at the left side of this curve and we look at, say, two large either country or Europe, the US and Europe, in that context, we see that the use of coal is declining over time. But when we look at it at a global level, we see that over the past 20 years, the share of coal in power systems has not really decreased significantly. Then when we move to Asia, actually, we see very high shares of coal in a range of different Asian power sectors. So this is an area that is very important to address. How can we accelerate the decrease of existing coal and accelerate that shift to clean energy? Next slide. So the way that we want to describe ETM, and it highlights both the importance of accelerating the retirement of coal, but also making that shift to clean energy. When we look at the left side of this curve and we look at the business as usual, we see that a power system will need to have supply meet demand, and this can be met with a range of technologies. And this we've highlighted in the brown color, the bars, we've highlighted coal-fired power generation and renewables. And what we see is that once you have built coal power plants, they operate for a long period of time and reduce the room for renewable energy. When we look at the situation with the energy transition mechanism, you see on the right side that by accelerating the retirement of these plants, there are three broad benefits. We end up reducing emissions, cumulative emissions from those plants over time. We create additional demand for clean energy investments. And then over the long run, we expect to see that the overall generation costs will decrease. One other point I'll highlight. You'll note that we don't close under this illustration. You don't see the coal-fired power plants closing immediately. While that would be good for the climate, it would be disruptive for power sector development and disruptive for the people and communities that may depend on that power plant for their livelihoods. In that respect, by managing the accelerated retirement of coal plants, we can ensure that people and communities are able to transition to new jobs and new opportunities. And this is often discussed under the term just transition. And I'll touch on that further in next slides. And when we look at this, so I'll touch on that, the just transition part now, but also look at it holistically of the different aspects of ETM that need to be considered. And we highlight this under what we call the 4P approach, anchoring the ETM, and that's people, policy, power, and partnership. So the people side is ensured that when we make the transition to clean energy, that people and communities aren't left behind. So that's the just transition aspects, and we're doing assessments, sourcing financing, and other approaches so that we can ensure that we understand what are the impacts, but also be able to support and mitigate these impacts through different measures. And also environmental and social safeguards are part of every project that ADB does, and that's one of the roles that we play in this type of approach. Policy is an incredibly important area, as this will support both policies and regulations that can accelerate this transition. So that's on both sides. How do we use policy to encourage the accelerated retirement, but also encourage the deployment of clean energy technologies And this can come in energy sector as well as in climate change policies that can really have this impact and accelerate this shift. On the power side, that's where we're really focusing on the actual investments and the technical operation of the power system, making sure that any things that we encourage, both on both sides of the coin of retirement and clean energy deployment, that the system can meet the long-term power needs of the country that support the economy. So this will include investments in a range of technologies such as storage as well as grids. And this is all built on a partnership, on a platform of partnership. And this is very important with national and international stakeholders, making sure that we're well aligned in the countries that we work with, in the goals of the country, and then bringing in external partners that can support this, whether that's the private sector, the philanthropies, and as well being responsive to non-governmental organizations and civil society organizations that may challenge some of these approaches. Now, let me take a look at describing the how this program is established within ADB. This is quite a full diagram, but I want to show this to illustrate the different ways that we're trying to both gather concessional support and then deploy that into meeting the goals that I've described in the regional ETM. So we're looking, as I said, accelerating and accelerating the retirement or repurposing of coal-fired power plants, but also the scale-up of investment, as well as ensuring that is a just and affordable transition. All those three need to work together, and this is how we're bringing this together within ADB. On the left-hand side, we've established the ETM Partnership Trust Fund. That's a way for us to receive concessional funds from both governments and philanthropies that then we can deploy to those three middle boxes in the middle. A highlight on top, what we call the ETM Fund Vehicle. This is a way to scale up this approach with both retiring coal and deploying clean energy. And we can do this in partnership with other international financial institutions and using global climate finance, as well as the private sector that can provide, when combined, a range of products, whether that's grant, debt, or equity, or even guarantees. So we're working right now to establish this ETM fund or ETM vehicle that can scale up the initial work. And that goes to that middle box where right now we're working on some first pilot transactions that ADB can lead and support directly. We're currently working on a transaction that we announced at the G20 in Indonesia, and that will involve both public sector and private sector funding. And again, have those elements of social safeguards included, as well as ensuring it's a just transition in accelerating that first coal plant. And we're also looking at how we can work with the public state-owned sectors across the three countries that we've highlighted. And then the last box is really the area where we prepare our work, where we help build capacities both in ADB but specifically more in the countries themselves, because this is a new approach to looking at addressing and mitigating climate emissions. So in that respect, we're doing analysis at the grid and technical level, just transition, as I've highlighted, helping develop new approaches to policy and regulations, understanding how carbon finance and carbon credit structuring could be used, and of course, measurement, reporting, and verification, so that these are robust transactions where we clearly understand what are the benefits, both financially and of course to the climate as well. And then just going on to the last set of boxes is the different types of transactions that we're considering. And I'll dig a bit more into that in some of the coming slides. Next slide, please. As part of our feasibility study work that we're doing, we're working across all these different areas. So we've divided this into project selection, which is very much a technical side of things, with some very specific plant-based analysis. When we understand which plants can fit from that perspective, we look at transaction structuring and further financial analysis to really see how we can put a deal together, because these deals have not been done at all in the Asian region, or maybe there's one deal that's been done so far. So we're trying to build on the knowledge and innovate in different approaches. Structuring the fund vehicles we highlighted, that's one of our core work streams. And then lastly, on the environmental, social, and governance aspects. And this is really a core aspect because power systems serve economies that serve societies. We must do this in a way that meets all those aspects. Next slide, please. When we look
Sorry,
at the...
Yep. 5 minutes. 5
Okay,
minutes.
thank you.
Right.
When we look at the different types of transactions, we originally started with number one, the acquisition model, where we would acquire a coal plant with the sole purpose of retiring it early. We moved, that model is still valid, but we've moved to what we call a synthetic model, where we would keep the existing shareholders engaged in the plant, but provide them financing and work with them to retire the plant earlier. We believe that this is a simpler approach from a transactional perspective, but also can ensure that the owners of it who understand the plant can be part of that transition story. And the portfolio model is looking at corporations that may own a large amount of plants over a geographic area, and we could find ways to fund them at a corporate level with key benchmarks to accelerate transition, and from that perspective, provide them benefits such as low-cost financing. Next slide, please. Looking at the synthetic model, this is just a diagram to demonstrate how this could work. When we look at the center, we have the project company that owns the coal-fired power plant, and we would provide a loan to the project company. This would then be used to potentially, it would offer a dividend to the sponsors for their agreement to retire the plant early, and would also pay off the existing debt. But since the funding or the loan from the ETM would be at a lower cost, the plant can operate under the current conditions, but for a much shorter amount of time. Next slide, please. And this demonstrates how that would look from an illustrative cash flow perspective. As under a business as usual, we see that the revenues from electricity production would go off, say, for 20 years, initially paying off the remaining debt, but then offering returns to the plant sponsors. After the ETM or the Carbon Reduction Fund investment, we would see an initial payout to the owners of the plant, but they would continue to operate for a much shorter amount of time. So this doesn't change the broad economics of the project, but rather uses low-cost financing to allow them to operate the plant for a shorter amount of time, but still meet their returns. So this is a very simple approach that of refinancing, but instead of taking the value and investing it in other aspects, they're using that value to reduce the life of the plant. Next slide, please. Under the portfolio model, I won't spend a lot of time on this, but what I want to highlight is that there is an approach when we're looking at a company or an organization that has a large number of plants, that they can, we could invest in this company with low-cost financing, but they would have to meet just transition as well as reduced use of coal metrics. And in that way, they would basically earn the low-cost financing. This is often called a sustainability-linked loan, and is another approach that could be applied to accelerate the retirement of coal plants. Next slide, please. So I'm coming on. This is my last slide before I end. I think I'm on time, Pak Joko. I want to just highlight again the comprehensive approach to just transition, and it's been this is a topic that is rather new in the last number of years, in that it very much says there may be people who lose benefits by the transition to clean energy. How do we support them? And I must again say that working together with Indonesia on this has been very encouraging, and they're showing the leadership of coming with us on this journey to learn while doing, and it's really, really exciting. And I'll just highlight that just transition is very much can be at a regional level and even a national level. And we're looking at how do we understand the impacts of retiring a coal-fired power plant, shifting to clean energy, first at the asset level, looking at the community level, and then seeing how that could be integrated at a subnational or even national level. And this is essential, I think, to any development approach that a country does. But in our case, we're trying to figure out how we can do the clean energy transition in a way that addresses these needs. And there's a range of activities that could be employed that provide support both directly and to direct and indirect workers in the community, as well as addressing environmental remediation issues and communities in general. So with that, I'd like to close and simply leave you with one last comment or message, in that we believe that the energy transition will need a range of solutions to help us support global climate goals within each and every country. So I've highlighted a program that has a lot of flexibility, a lot of different approaches, and these approaches can then be tailored within countries going forward. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Pak David. Very beautiful closing, Pak. Yeah, because you are also aware and also concerned regarding on the just transition definition. Yeah, talking about the ETM itself is not only from the financing aspect, but also linking with the environment, linking with the social, linking with another aspect. So now we invite Ibu Masita. Yeah, Ibu Masita, the special advisor from the Minister of Finance, will deliver around 25 minutes with two sub issue. The first regarding on the ASEAN decarbonization pathway, and the second issue regarding on the explain case from the Indonesia. So Ibu Masita, the time is yours.
Thank you, Pak Joko. Thank you, everyone. Can I have my slide up, please? So David has already discussed a lot about the transition mechanism and also energy transition in general. I would like to flag on the number first. So if we're looking at the energy sector in the Southeast Asia developing countries, I don't have my slide up, yeah. Hello?
Hello,
Pak Joko?
Yeah.
Do we have our slide up? Not yet?
Yeah, already set up. Already so.
Oh, already? Because I cannot see it.
Oh.
Okay. So with the energy sector in the Southeast Asia developing countries, we can see that with the combined GDP of nearly 3 trillion in 2020, ASEAN is of course one of the most vibrant and fifth largest economy. Here Indonesia is the largest, but if you can see the total primary energy supply by fuel, then you can see that until 2020, coal and also oil are still dominating. We see increase in natural gas, but also an increasing use of renewable and traditional use of biomass that is also at least carbon neutral. Next slide, please. Fossil fuel accounted for more than 90% of the growth in energy, as Ibu Dian has already emphasized in the beginning. Of course, the issue of transition is always the big two variable. It has to be just and it has to be affordable. Why it has to be affordable? Because if it's not affordable for consumer, it will be hard to actually make the energy transition project scalable. But also because a lot of the energy investment started with fiscal as the catalytic financing, then without affordability to the fiscal, it is also hard to do energy transition project and hard to scale it up at the country level. We can see the power generation mix in 2010, and 2020. You can see the share of the energy mix. The purple one, gas, has already increased. If you total the number of gas, hydropower, and other renewables, actually the proportion has already improved somewhat in the region. And in this region, hydropower is still the main renewable energy source for the country. In Indonesia also included, because we have a lot of hydropower possibility. Slide 4, please, because I cannot see the slide, so I'm hoping that the slide align with my discussion, ya Pak Joko.
Ya, Mbak.
So in the Indonesia power sector, we can see that the total electricity consumption has continuously grown in Indonesia for the last 10 years. Hopefully, with the economic recovering after the pandemic, we're also hoping that at some point the energy situation is going to be resolved. But the potential of the economy, not just for Indonesia, but for the region, is huge. And hence, an increase in the energy mix, especially on the renewable energy, will be expected. Next slide, please. So we have several constraints to accelerate the energy transition. Some countries have, excess demand, or undersupply of energy in emerging market or low-income countries. In the case of Indonesia, we actually have an overcapacity of electricity. That's why the setup of the energy transition mechanism has actually need to be aligned with the country need. In the case of Indonesia, we cannot bundle together the phase out of the coal power plant with the development of the renewable energy, because we need to solve the issue of oversupply or overcapacity first before actually building new capacity on the renewable energy side. The GOI still has an ambitious target of 23% by 2025. And we're currently establishing and analyzing the roadmap for energy transition, as well as carbon exchange and carbon market development, which hopefully will be established in 2025. Next slide, please. So for any developing economy, we can see that, energy issues, we talk about energy transition, but we still have to make sure that there's energy security for the country, affordability, especially in the era of economic recovery, and also sustainable economic growth. Next slide, please. If you're looking at the other issues on the affordability side, is that not just the financing of the energy transition project, but also who is going to finance the stranded asset, right? If we're looking at the IEA data, with the business as usual scenario, then you will have an increase in the brown energy. But with the decarbonization plan, we can see that the issue of stranded asset is getting more serious if you're looking at between the dotted line and also the line. IEA approximately estimate that there will be 300 billion worth of investment in fossil fuel that has made previously that would become stranded. And of course, we need to ask the questions as policymakers, who will bear this cost? How much can be pushed to consumer? How much will be taken over by the fiscal capacity? And how much that we can rely on private sector investment on this area? Next slide, please. The stranded asset situation, if we're looking at by type, we see that the biggest estimate come from the stranded asset of power station and also the oil fields. But the coal mines is relatively small in proportion and also gas field. Yeah, the biggest part is the power station and also the oil fields. And then in the next 10 to 20 years, when a lot of countries are starting to do the energy transition mechanism, is going to be faced with the same issues. And then together as region, we need to solve this together, and ADB or World Bank as multilateral development bank could also work hand in hand, because single-handedly solving this issue will not be possible. Next slide, please. So energy transition, I'll skip this to make it to the 25-minute. I'll go straight to slide 11. On the Indonesia NDC commitment. So I've told you about how the macroeconomic situation and also the overall energy situation and challenge of energy transition. But then how do we translate these big plans into country step-by-step plans? So we always start with the Paris Agreement and also NDC. We have first NDC in 2016, updated, and we have currently in 2022, the third BUR. It involved policy strengthening and also policy implementation. We also are developing the carbon pricing. We have regulation on carbon tax, but of course, implementation will depend on the economic recovery. And also we created energy transition mechanism, which started in COP26 with ADB, with having a clean energy fund and also carbon reduction fund. And since then, we have also developed our country platform as well. Next slide, please. I'll skip this. So as going to slide 13 on the taxonomy. So that part is the overall national plan, and then we narrow it down into specific energy transition mechanism plan. On the other hand, we're also preparing for the transition financing, right? So on the transition financing in the G20, Indonesia have continued Italy presidency on discussing about transition activities and also transition finance. And the consequence of this is that we need an interoperable taxonomy, yeah, so that we have transition activity and finance in the taxonomy. Hence, transition activities, including coal phase out, can be done because it already has a category. Now, if you want to invest in a coal phase out, for example, it will be categorized as a brown energy investment because it's still coal. But with the new taxonomy, we are hoping that after transition activities are recognized, we can actually get financing for transition activities into the old or the brown energy, such as coal power plant. So there's several transition finance and taxonomy in the world. We're currently working on the ASEAN. So in the ASEAN, we have a basic traffic light system. We have green, amber, and also red. So transition finance here is defined as financing that enable activities to move to a higher color classification. So we can start with the green, but then you have a timeline of phasing out, and then you move to amber, and finally, when the transition deadline is done, then the sector or the brown energy sector can become red. So we don't go directly from green to red, but we are doing step by step from green, amber, and then red. A lot of the other taxonomy also have similar definition of transition. However, we have to make sure that between taxonomy in the global community, we have an interoperable system so that we can move around the carbon credit coming from the energy transition mechanism project. Next slide, please. Okay, I'll skip the G20. I'll go directly to slide 18. So, like David mentioned, Indonesia has been working closely with ADB since it's first announced in the COP26. For any project, especially long-term investment project, government or country ownership and country leadership in creating a new system or reform is actually something that is very, very necessary to continue with the reform. So Indonesia has been working to create Indonesia ETM country platform and has appointed PT SMI as the country platform manager, which was announced during the G20 summit. We have a mechanism like David, we're talking about more on the instrument side. Here, we're talking about, the relationship between stakeholders. Yeah, so you can see that above there's a steering committee of government officials and ministries that are related to energy sectors and also environment. And then we have the country platform manager that will deal deal by deal, working on deal by deal and looking at different plan. We have two different sides. We have the coal phase out on the left-hand side, and also we have the renewable energy development. The role of the concessional financing here, you can see we're doing blended finance on the right-hand corner. The source is always fiscal and philanthropists, MDBs, some part of MDBs are commercial, some part are still concessional. And for commercial, we also have MDBs private side, but also private sector, including Indonesia Sovereign Wealth Fund, INA. For the concessional fund, the function is actually has to be as a catalytic financing role, right? We cannot expect concessional fund to finance all of the investment because the amount won't be sufficient to finance all the energy transition project. In Indonesia specifically, we have two types of asset, so owned by PLN directly or private asset or IPP projects. So in these two types, the legal environment are different. Of course, the asset owned by PLN must fall under the state finance law and hence has to adhere with several characteristics that's different from the market side. But we're quite optimistic that we can continue this. For the private side, in November during the G20 summit, we have also announced the transaction with the Indonesia Sovereign Wealth Fund as well as ADB on the CFPP, the coal-fired power plant, the private side of the project. On the PLN side, we're hoping to be able to make it this year so that we can continue not only from the private asset side, but also from the government asset. Let's go to slide 21. Indonesia ETM progress update. So we have held a series of FGDs coordinations during 2020, which end in the appointment of PT SMI with the regulation of the Ministry of Finance. During this, we also have the announcement of JETP partnership on energy transition with President Jokowi and also President Joe Biden. We also have a high-level sustainable finance for climate transition roundtable in July, which we appointed PT SMI as the country platform manager. But on the side, as David mentioned, the just part of the energy transition is also important and we need preparation on that. So we're working with ADB closely on the strategic environment and social assessment or SESA. We just did another stakeholder consultation last week, and we're hoping that this overall social and environmental project could be finalized this year. But also, once we have a project down, we will have to do another analysis for environmental and social assessment at the project level. So we have the macro level, but also we have the project level. Next slide, please. Okay, I'll skip this. So I'll talk about just transition, safeguard, and gender consideration for a little bit. Next slide, slide 24. This is a comprehensive approach to just transition. We're doing it with collaboration with different stakeholders, including communities, NGOs. We're working closely with ADB with this. We have the asset level, yeah, but also at the larger community level, sub-national level. This will deals with different regional government at the national level and also the regional level. For the regional level, we have just transition technical report by ADB, but also we have the coal market outlook by the World Bank. For this, we have a Safe Act investment plan for project which involve ADB, IFC, and also World Bank with the government of Indonesia. We're hoping that this could be finalized as well this year before the ASEAN summit. Next slide, please. For the strategic environment and social assessment, the climate goal, of course, need the whole economy transition. And in order to minimize disruption to the economy and livelihood, and also maintain social support to net zero transition, we need to tackle both the issue in the environmental side and also social impact. For the social impact, we need reskilling, for example. It will take some time to do. For the environment, these are the things that we're currently looking at, but of course, we can also develop it further. For the social, it's a livelihood displacement, but also there's an issue of regional, right? So for example, you phase out a power plant in Java, but the replacement will be in Kalimantan. So the social impact in the one that's left out cannot be directly transferred into the development of the renewable because the region can be very different. So here we're still thinking on the mechanism on how to do reskilling and re-updating for the labor market. Next slide, please. This is the detail for the strategic environmental and social assessment or SESAP project. The scoping, the phase 1 is to exercise and identify key risks on environmental and social and opportunities also associated with transition. We have completed this in the mid of last year. And the phase 2 is the assessment, which we are currently working on until July 2023. Individual project, like I mentioned, will be assessed after we have decided the project that we're working on next. And we're going to do another mini SESA for project level called Environmental and Social Impact Assessment. Next slide, please. So if we're looking at, climate in general, gender is usually one part that is also affected disproportionately because of the climate change. Because women industrial contractual workers are usually more women in that type of sector. On the informal coal extractive, we also have significant number or proportion of women. And also, but in the large industrial scale mine, there's a smaller proportion of women. So we can see that how this might impact disproportionately to women, especially women on the lower scale of the skill, and hence also on the lower scale of income as well. Next slide. I'll skip this. So I think I'll stop there, Pak Joko. Thank you for the time.
Yeah, thank you, Ibu Masita. So this is also linkage with the previous Pak David present, closing with the just transition, including gender, social displacement, and also other related issues. So this is like the comprehensive assessment. If we look from the ATM itself, this is not only talking about the financial aspect, not talking just the technical aspect, but also engage with so many other issue, gender, social, environment, and also worker. And before we actually we have almost 45 minutes on the Q&A. But before I give the floor to the audience and also college, I try to use my privilege, Pak David, ya, Ibu Masita, to ask first both sides, ya, first to Pak David and second to Ibu Masita. To Pak David, somebody give me this question, Pak David. How do you see the ETM relevant for the country with no or limited CFPP? So can you elaborate further on the finance and banking policy priority that are urgently needed for this effective clean energy transition in South Asia? So this is the question for Pak David. And for the Ibu Masita, aside from the Asian taxonomy, like Bu Masita previously already mentioned, are there any issue related to the clean energy transition that should be discussed at the Asian level? So this is a basic question to Ibu Masita. You can answer Pak David and Ibu Masita.
Okay, Ibu Masita, would you like to go first?
No, go ahead. You can go first, David.
All right. Well, thank you. So yeah, it's definitely every country has a different generation mix, especially in the ASEAN region. You have countries with very high amounts of hydro, countries with large amounts of gas, and countries with high shares of coal. Many countries still have issues around or using oil or diesel for power. And in that context, I believe that the concepts or the approaches in the energy transition mechanism can apply to all fossil fuels and making that transition to clean energy. So I think that's one of the things that, as a transition mechanism, the power of this approach is that looking to move to clean energy, you can meet the country where they are today. So in that respect, looking at investing in trying to stop doing the things you want to stop doing and accelerating or increasing the investment in the things that you want to do, and say that would be in clean energy. But one of the things that I think is important is the range of investments that could happen under an ETM in any country. And this can be in technologies such as grids and energy storage, and also in energy efficiency. And these are areas where at times the markets within the power sector do not specifically accommodate these technologies, even though they have both technical benefits and can enable higher shares of clean energy. If the markets do not support this, then it will be very difficult for investment. So that's that linkage between the technical side as well as the market side to create the opportunity for bankable projects that then the finance community, both the public sector as well as the private sector, can support to make that clean energy transition. In the last area, I think that is often ignored and is very important, is around energy efficiency. And in that respect, this is an area where the financial sector is often not very comfortable investing in. And therefore, I think this is somewhere that it is important to understand how energy efficiency can play a role, especially in economies that are significantly growing, both in economic areas, but also in energy needs. Energy efficiencies can increase the increase the efficiency of the economy in general and lower the price overall of energy, despite what technology is used for generation. So this is one core area that I think can fit and will fit in energy transition mechanisms going forward as we develop the approach and learn from what we're doing already. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Pak David. So, Bu Masita can respond.
Thank you, Pak Joko. So as I mentioned, previously when we didn't acknowledge the existence of transition activity and also transition finance, we have a category of green financing, right? Even though there's a lot of comment about this green financing, the amount is not enough, where the 100 billion promised by the developed economies. And also, if we're talking about the green bonds, why we don't get a green MIUM out of it, with the additional difficulty of having it, there's no additional benefit in terms of yield for issuing a green bond vis-a-vis a brown bond. So this kind of environment, there's still a lot of commentaries and enabling environment that we need to create or we need to develop further. But on the other hand, now we need a new asset class development. So the asset class that, as David mentioned, either it's a transition link loan or a transition link bond. So it's a transition bond. So not exactly green bonds, but not a regular bond as well. It's a transition bonds. It's necessary for countries to do transition activities or working on the transition period to achieve net zero. So the requirement is, of course, a game plan that we can all agree on, right? Taxonomy is one way that we can approach it. So, for example, if we have a taxonomy for transition, then we know for a certain country, they already have plans to transition their energy sectors into renewables, and hence the brown energy that are planned to be phased out can be included in this, so you get the financing. But also in another country, for example, they have different timeline, different roadmap, so it can also be acknowledged. And of course, there's an issue of verification here. We need an acceptable, globally accepted verification for how much carbon reduction that we created from doing the phase out itself, right? Because it definitely lowered the emission. We also not only the verification, but also create the market for it. On the other hand, for the global market, the global carbon market, we also need to add, these transition activities into the carbon reduction as well, to give more incentive for countries to do transition activities. So a lot of homework. One part is taxonomy, another part is creating a new asset class, another is on the acceptable regulation verification that is globally accepted, and also the overall reliance of countries and policymakers to make that transition of our priority together. And we cannot work on the transition alone. Emerging market only cannot work on it alone. We need also financing. But in order to be able to create the financing market that is also efficient, then we need all of this requirement or enabling environment that I mentioned before. So during our work in the ASEAN this year, we're trying to develop all of this pillar at the ASEAN level, but also in Indonesia, we're looking at our own taxonomy to be able to cater towards our transition roadmap. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Ibu Masita. So many homework, Ibu Masita, development new methodology, how to transform the carbon reduction to replace the carbon avoidance definition, and also new class asset. This is a very tough homework for us and also for ASEAN. So now we give the opportunity for colleagues, who will be respond and also give like the concern to both sides from Ibu Masita or Pak David. Somebody can raise your hand. who will give the response to Ibu Masita or Pak David? Particularly from the ASEAN member state. Okay, no response. If we still try to wait until somebody has the response, perhaps I still have one question, yeah, Ibu Masita and also Pak David. Yeah. But this is the similar question regarding the urgency of regional dialogue or cooperation under the ASEAN to support the ASEAN decarbonization pathway. So how your view, Ibu Masita and also Pak David, the urgency of regional dialogue and also cooperation under the ASEAN member states?
Thank you, Pak Joko. I think I'll start first. So, climate, like the COVID pandemic, is actually global public goods, right? So the way we solve climate issues has to acknowledge the characteristic of a global public goods. And in a global public good, we need to really take care of, the coordination between countries, because if we let it naturally to the market force to work, then we will not get an optimal solution. So coordination is definitely important, but the number two questions that is more important as well is that in what area should we coordinate, in what level, right? Because country has their own sovereignty. They also has different challenge after the economic recovery. We have different fiscal condition. We have different external debt situation that could create into a debt sustainability impact differently to our countries. The speed of our monetary tightening after the pandemic is also, we have different speed because we started with different inflation. The reliance of energy imports are different from each other. But also, the extent to which we have issues of energy security in the short run is also different. So I think we are challenged because we have different situation. We cannot have a similar or the same solution to all countries. So we cannot be saying, okay, this is the rule, this is the exact threshold everybody has to follow. So I think the mechanism that we have so far under UNFCCC, Pak Joko, I think is really good, because every country can have their own target and then they're measured according to their target. But of course, NDC alone, if you calculate between countries, it may not reach the net zero by the time we plan to be. So there need to be some acceleration in countries. That's from the project side, yeah, from the good side. The goods is the climate, right? On the other hand, on the financing side, we have heard a lot of big stories about advanced economy would like to coordinate climate fund together. It seems like that type of coordination have failed so far. So if we're doing the same thing, we cannot expect a different result, right? I think what ADB and Indonesia has trying to do so far can be something that I think it can inspire other countries, because one, the country Indonesia has ownership of the overall project and economic reform, and second, the partner, the MDBs, which is in this case is ADB, is also being open-minded in looking at different solution that is probably not created yet, or is not common under the old climate understanding in the global community. So I think we shouldn't be looking at climate from the angle of far away European country, looking at emerging Asia, you have to really see country case by country case and then create a solution based on the country condition, country capability, country ownership, and also country owns target. But of course, we need to, as the global community, we need to race to the top rather than race to the bottom, creating enabling environment for everyone to be able to perform in the climate. One on the climate target like the UNFCCC, but also on the financing side, I think the new asset class for the transition finance is something that we need to push further. We have started last year and even during the Italy presidency, but I think we really need to looking at the details. See, that Pak Joko mentioned from carbon avoidance to carbon reduction, the verification method that is acceptable globally, creating a new regulation, and then creating asset class that is accepted globally, because we cannot do this alone. So I think we can use ASEAN and also APEC. US is the chairmanship of APEC this year. The regional, fora like this would be very useful in providing different colors, because I think every region sort of have their own specificity in terms of the energy security, but also fiscal capability, but also overall economic situation. Thank you.
Yeah, Pak David.
Yeah, thank you, and very much enjoyed your comments, Masita, and strong agreement with them. I think it's very much that when I reflect on the ASEAN region and the opportunities for regional dialogue and cooperation, it's always striking that balance of what can benefit my country, how can I build those partnerships with other countries where we can find co-benefits, benefits that are available to each of the partners or to the region as a whole. And when I look at the decarbonization side, in the scale of the population in the ASEAN region, I think that there's a significant opportunity just in broad level trade, and we've seen that with some agreements that have been made historically, and as well that can be applied to the energy sector. So that's, I think, using the market force through working together is, I think, a real opportunity. Finding the similarities and the differences. As a Canadian, I reflect on how different the climate is in Southeast Asia compared to, say, in Canada. That has a huge impact on the development of your energy system. And in that respect, air conditioning is one of those key areas, and appliance standards, which is not an exciting topic in one respect, but such an important topic that can provide benefits not only to consumers, but to the societies in general, or the governments who are supporting power sector development by increasing energy efficiency standards, benefits to consumers and governments and to utilities. These are things that are very structural, and if applied at a regional level, can provide even larger benefits and also prevent problems like leakage of certain, say, air conditioning with lower standards being traded across borders. I'm just giving these as an examples to say that I think there are enough similarities in areas of cooperation. And I reflect on the broader benefits of dialogue and cooperation in terms of long-term trust building in the region that can provide benefits far beyond energy sector. And I think we see that. I reflect often on the Nord Pool, the power trade in the Scandinavian and European countries. I absolutely agree with Masita's point that we just can't take solutions on their own and apply them from one region to the other. But I think principles can be applied. And in that respect, the power trade there of using the hydro from Norway as a significant battery for the deployment of wind and other renewables in other parts of the Nordic region, I think is a powerful example of how that can be established. And that's not something that happens overnight. That's something that happens over a long-term period. And under ASEAN, I think the relationships are there for the long term, and these things can be investigated and built upon. And I'll just lastly highlight again the asset class under transition. I think this is such an important area to work on. Transition really accepts where countries are and meets them where they are today towards making progress, and doesn't say you're in a bad place. No, it's not good or bad. You are where you are today. I think we all have desires to build our respective countries, to be good for society and global partners in the world. And I think transition and different asset classes that can support that transition in a positive way will be incredibly important long term, not only in the ASEAN region, but globally. So thank you.
Thank you, Pak David. So this is very interesting. Yeah, when we discuss on the ETM already very comprehensive and multi-interlinkages issue, and not only a specific issue, but also development issue for the next discussion. So we still give the opportunity for the audience, to give the response, and also perhaps colleagues from Singapore Ministry of Finance or other colleagues under the ASEAN member state. Somebody will give response. Okay, if no question from the audience, perhaps we can conclude today's discussion, the first discussion under the ASEAN chairmanship, and also under the ASEAN Birds taxonomy, and then the working group too. And today we deliver a very impressive and also very important issue delivered by Pak David, the principal principal energy specialist. Sorry, Pak David, because very difficult to remember your title. The principal energy specialist, climate change, and also ETM team leader. Very tough to remember your title, Pak David. And also special advisor from Ibu Masita. And we have so many experience and lesson from ETM itself, from the technical aspect, from the country perspective, from the regional dialogue urgency, and also other issues. And now we turn to the closing statement on the proposal delivered by Pak Adi. Pak Adi already joined. Yeah, because Pak Adi is not yet joined, the closing statement will deliver by Ibu Masita. So the time is yours, Ibu Masita.
Thank you, Pak Joko. Thank you, David and colleague, for today's discussion. I hope that our discussion today on energy transition mechanism and also transition in general could help us as to kickstart the work that we will be doing together during this ASEAN. The affordability side of the transition is also important here, not just at consumer level, but also at the fiscal level. We need to really looking into this so that we can really scale up the transition activities. We also see that transition to green economy have a lot of challenges, including stranded asset issues, subsidy for energy in many countries, and also energy security that are facing not just low-income countries, but also emerging economies and developed economies during this tough time. On the other hand, we are dealing with the uncertainty in the global economic condition. We know that many countries, not just the emerging market, but also the advanced economy, are facing a lot of challenge, starting with inflation, which requires both fiscal and monetary tightening. At the same time, countries are still creeping up into the economic development after the COVID pandemic. So how do we align global investment so that they could actually incentivize, not punish different climate projects to result in a significant emission reduction? Of course, this is not an easy endeavor, as mentioned in the previous session. There's a uniqueness in each country and region capabilities, but also we all know that because it needs to be interoperable, certain mechanisms that are very general needs to be maintained because climate is really a global public goods, and it's not only will affect us now in the short run, but also to the next generation in the future. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the initiative in the form of a blended finance, but also in the form of transition taxonomy and also creating the transition asset class will be an important pathway for us to finance the net zero transition in the future. So we, in the ASEAN communities, we recommend MDBs and other international organizations to devote more resource, not just financially, but also to help the expertise and the open-mindedness to actually tackle these difficult issues together with many of the client developing economies. Policy action also need to send correct market signal, not just in the regular market, but also in the market of global public goods such as climate condition. We need to accelerate private capital flow to different infrastructure projects for development in emerging economy, including ASEAN especially, but also making sure that the green investment and also transition investment are still a big part of that investment. To minimize disruption to economies and livelihood and maintain societal support for net zero transition, mitigation of the environment and social impact of transition while ensuring just and affordable is critical. So the Paris Agreement, the G20 Leaders Rome Declaration, and at COP27 in Egypt, where parties have already recognized the need to ensure a just transition that promotes sustainable development, and don't forget the affordability part of it too. The government of Indonesia also aware on this particular issue. We developed the ETM with the environmental and social safeguard, and also working on our transition taxonomy. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to express thank you and appreciation for Pak Joko, Ibu Dian, and also Pak David for a very fruitful discussion, and all of you who are coming today. I hope the kickoff of this topic for the ASEAN chairmanship this year will give us enough, ammunition, to have a longer and further discussion to fast forward our transition activities in Asia together. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Bu Masita. Thank you for your kindness to close this session, and to all the audience. Yeah, please remember that we will meet a few days. Yeah, in next 9 February with another in-person seminars, side seminar under the Asian Chairmanship, aligning energy transition on the development under the ASEAN. So hopefully we can meet in Bali, beautiful paradise, and also at the Kudus Island. So once again, for me as the moderator, give a sorry, and also we can conclude this session with Alhamdulillah. Yeah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you.